So we're now up to the ninth track on Prince's 1999 album. We're up to the final side on his double LP, which would be either side D or 4. And joining me again to chat about Lady Cab Driver is Karen Shedrick. Welcome back to the show, Karen.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you for having me.
I think that it's been a while since we've chatted. We were last discussed Controversy, the first song on Prince's last album, but there's been a lot of tracks in between Controversy and Lady Cab Driver. So, what have you been up to? How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Just getting ready for the holidays, and I guess like most Prince fans, I did get the 1999 box set. I got the CDs. I didn't get the albums, but experiencing 1999 all over again has just been really fun. It's just taking me back to, when I saw the 1999 concert and just how amazing that album is.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. I also just recently received the Super Deluxe edition of the 1999 reissue, remaster as well, and it's been quite a journey listening to that. Kind of like an early Christmas present for me personally. I mean, I was debating whether or not I should save it because I had all of the MP3s so I could hear it anyway. And I was I was debating whether or not I was going to wait to open it on Christmas just to kind of give myself a Christmas gift. But I was too impatient. I was unable to do that. So I cracked it open and just enjoying the whole package, the whole remaster, reissue. There's a lot of tracks on there. Lady Cab Driver sounds great, as all the rest of the songs do as well.
It does. And it's just nice to hear all of the unreleased music, just to see how just extremely talented he was at such a young age.
Yeah, for sure. He was very prolific as well, with 2 discs worth of vault tracks at our disposal now, officially released vault tracks. So it's been quite an interesting past couple of weeks since it's released. It's early December as we're recording this episode, so for a lot of people, a lot of Prince fans really into this album. We're hearing a lot of these songs for the very first time. They're still kind of new, still kind of fresh in our minds.
Right.
And so that's really a really cool gift that we were given as Prince fans this Christmas, basically, is all of these new songs. But Lady Cab Driver is the song we're talking about today, and this is, as I mentioned, the 9th song on the album of 11 tracks. We're towards the back portion, the back quarter of the album. So, these last few songs, they really run the gamut. Different sounds, different themes, and the song that I did before this, Free, completely different theme than the song we're going to be doing today.
Yeah.
So when I think of Lady Cab Driver, when I listen to the song, it kind of comes across to me as a bit of a fantasy put to music. And, Prince or his character is the subject of the song, or, the protagonist, and then he meets this woman, this mysterious cab driver. And what happens from the rest of the song time, the time that the opening chords, guitar, and then there's the hand claps that the song starts off with, and the Lynn drum. And then when Prince enters into that cab, from that moment on, the rest of the song kind of feels to me like a fantasy. I don't like something that's not really happening. It's almost like it's a figment of someone's imagination. And we know that all of these songs are coming from the imagination of Prince, but this song, for whatever reason, comes across to me more as a fantasy than most of the other songs on this album. What do you get when you listen to this song, Karen?
So when I listen to it, to me it does sound like something that could be happening, especially when you hear him hail the taxi. Like, this is a real person hailing a cab, getting into a cab, saying that it's a lady cab driver, and he's attracted, and he starts talking to this cab driver about trouble winds are blowing. He's not in a good place. He's lonely, and he wants her to take him everywhere, take him to her mansion. He wants to kind of escape from whatever he's dealing with. at that time, the character.
Uh-huh.
So that's how I relate to it. Like it's something that could actually happen to someone.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, because I take it kind of like as escapism for the singer, for Prince or whomever, the character of Prince that he's playing in this song. It comes across to me as a bit of like escapism. Like he's like we both agree like the lyrics are pretty plain. He's got problems. He's experiencing some sort of existential crisis or having
Right.
issues in a relationship, but there's something going down that he feels very uncomfortable about, and so he's almost like using this cab ride as like therapy or escapism, like I mentioned before. So we both are on the same page there, and it's kind of interesting how we both have different takes on where the song goes, which is kind of cool. So on that note, I think maybe we'll just get started looking at the lyrics.
Okay.
Okay, so as you mentioned, he hails a cab early on in the song. You hear him say "taxi, taxi." If we're imagining this as a scene in a movie or something like that,
Right.
I think of Prince like standing on the street corner. He hails his cab. He enters, and as soon as he sits down, he starts singing these lyrics to this woman. He notices that it's a woman cab driver, which, is not a very common thing. Let's just be honest. I looked at
Right.
I looked at the stats because I wanted to see if my perception of women cab drivers was reality. So I looked at the stats, and as of 2000, I know that's almost 20 years ago now, but I don't think it's changed that significantly in 19 years. There was only approximately 13% of all cab drivers were women. So
Wow.
yeah, so that's not a very big percentage. And if you go back to even further, they didn't have numbers for like 1980 or 1982 when the song was written. But if you go back 40 years prior to that, it was like 5 or 6%. So I imagine around the 80s, early 80s, those numbers were probably around 10% or so, maybe a little less. So that's not a good likelihood that Prince's cab is going to have a woman driving it at the time. So so right off the bat, that kind of this is kind of a little bit why I think of it as escapism for him, because the fact that he was picked up by a cab driver, A, and B, she's very attractive, so we have to
Right.
assume.
Yeah. What's the likelihood
So
of that? So yes.
he's now in a cab, and his first lines are, "Lady cab driver, can you take me for a ride? Don't know where I'm going because I don't know where I've been. So just put your foot on the gas, let's drive." So right off the bat, as we both agreed, he's kind of just wanting to go. He doesn't say specifically where he is asking her to take him. Just take me for a ride. Don't know where I'm going. Right there. He doesn't know where he's going, and I don't know where I've been. So, and I actually, when I heard this, or when I was going through the lyrics to this, it reminded me a little bit of the ending of Joint to Joint. You remember that song off Emancipation?
Right. It does.
He gets it after all of that. After that, I mean, that song is kind of bonkers in terms of like all the different ways it goes musically, and all the different directions it takes. But at the very end, he gets into a car. I don't think it's necessarily a cab. It could be a cab. It could be just his personal driver or whatever. But if we assume it's a cab, he says something similar. He says, the guy goes, "Where to?" And I think Prince says, like, "Anywhere, just drive."
Right. Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, no, I mean, for years I hadn't thought about that either. It just came to me when I was going through the lyrics in preparation for this episode. But so he that's a little bit of a harkening back to Lady Cab Driver, recorded in 1982. That was a mid-90s Prince song, and so 15 years later, he is doing the same thing on Emancipation. But yeah, in this song, he's saying doesn't know where he's going because I don't know where I've been. So he feels like I feel like he's a little lost, not
Exactly.
just not physically lost, but like emotionally lost. Like he just is a little bit in a troublesome spot, I guess.
Right. That's what I understood. Like I don't know where you can take me, but like you said, just drive and we'll figure it out,
Yeah,
basically.
we'll figure it out exactly.
Right.
And then the next line, lady, don't ask questions. Promise I'll tell you no lies. Trouble winds are blowing, I'm growing cold. Get me out of here, I feel I'm gonna die. And that for me is also just kind of saying a lot of the same things. Like the first verse is really introducing the setup for the song where he hails the cab and then he tells her basically nothing. He doesn't really give her any indication of what he's doing, where he's going. He tells her no, don't ask any questions, so he doesn't have to lie to her. Trouble winds are blowing. I'm growing cold. Get me out of here. I feel I'm gonna die. That could mean get me out of the city. That could mean get me out of whatever situation I put myself in or that I find myself in. And this is why I continue to think of it a little bit like an escapism song. Like he's just trying to run away from the realities of his life or of the world around him.
I agree, and I don't know if anyone else thinks of this, but whenever I hear the song, the honking horns, I always just envision New York. And
Yeah.
a lot of people come to New York because they're running from something or they're escaping from another situation, and they're coming to New York to start over or to do something different. And I don't know why I just picked that up when I first heard that song. He must be in New York, even though he probably obviously could be anywhere. But
Yeah, right. You're not alone. You're not alone with that. I mean, as a kid, when I heard this song, and I think because maybe when I was a child, a lot of television shows that took place in New York City, you would always see them hailing cabs because that was like the main mode of transportation. Like hardly anybody drives in New York City. Where
right.
I've been to Minneapolis many times, and everybody drives there. And in a city like Los Angeles, everybody knows that's a city of cars. So New York City is just a city where taxi cabs are super prevalent, at least especially in the 1980s. So I think that you're probably not the only person, Karen, that their brain immediately went to Prince is in New York. What's he doing in New York City?
Right.
So yeah, it's and for this song to start this way, I guess a little bit for me also the whole album kind of leading up to this point gives Prince and us as the listener kind of some reasons for him to think like things aren't going so well. If you think back at like the different track listings, starting off the album with 1999, we've got nuclear holocaust fears and just the end of the world. And then much of the rest of the album, he's dealing with, relationship issues,
right.
Automatic, Something in the Water, Little Red Corvette even. So there's plenty of songs leading up to Lady Cab Driver that if you're listening to this sequentially, you can think like he's escaping all of this stuff that he's been singing about up to this point on the record. Maybe trying to escape, the city because he feels like, if there's going to be a nuclear attack, New York City is going to be a target. So if we're just running with the idea that he's in New York City, plus then you got the next song is All the Critics Love You in New York. So I think the two songs back to back, and they kind of bleed into each other, really gives us that feeling that he's in New York City, even more so than maybe if All the Critics Love You in New York wasn't the next song.
Right.
So he's got all these relationship issues that he's trying to leave one of these bad relationships that he finds himself in, or he's just trying to get out of the city, escape to the country, escape to somewhere else where he feels safe. And luckily for him, he's got an attractive female cab driver to take him there.
That's right.
Lady cab driver, roll up your window fast. Lately trouble winds are blowing hard and I don't know if I can last. So that is basically the chorus where he repeats the line, the lady cab driver line, and the trouble winds are blowing hard. So he says trouble winds are blowing in the verse, but he expands on that with the trouble winds are blowing hard, and I don't know if I can last. The chorus for me just more of the same, where he's really just kind of explaining his position to the cab driver and explaining why he needs to take this ride. Any other thoughts on the chorus or first verse, Karen?
Pretty much the same thing. Where is this cab driver going to take him? Does she understand what he's saying, that he really needs to escape? He mentioned don't ask questions. She could have been like, what are you talking about? But I think seeing him in a cab, I'm thinking that he's trying to convince her, look, I just need some help here. I just need you to, get me out of here, get me to a different place because I'm dealing with something right now. If you think about it that way, he's literally just still talking to her about, look, this is what I want you to do.
Yeah, and the line, I feel like I'm going to die, or I feel I'm going to die, you could take that a couple different ways, too. You could take it literally, like if you're thinking from back to lyrics of 1999 and what's going on in that song. Like, right. Literally, I could die if I don't get out of here. Or you could also think of it just, emotionally, he's dying inside and he needs a relief. He needs an escape. And, people say that sometimes and not mean it, like I'm dying or, I feel like I'm going to die, when really they're just scared. They're just really frightened. And it's overpowering for him. And that's why he's escaping.
And I like the fact that you can look at it from so many different angles, either literally or metaphorically, Yeah. I like that.
Yeah. So the next verse, lady, I'm so lonely. I know that's not the way to be. Don't want isolation, but the air, it makes me cold. Drive it, baby, drive it. Drive this demon out of me. So this is the first portion of the next verse. And so now he's talking now. He's not just giving instructions to drive and don't ask me questions, get me out of here. He's actually starting to open up to the lady cab driver. He explains that he's so lonely and he doesn't want to be lonely. He knows that isn't, he says that's not the way to be. So he understands that his loneliness is not where he wants. It's not something he desires, his loneliness. Because he says, I don't want isolation, but the air, it makes me cold. So he's looking for, as you mentioned, some help. I feel like he's looking for like a shoulder to cry on almost, but he doesn't really want to cry. He's looking for something else, but I think he's also using potentially a sexual encounter with the lady cab driver as a therapy session. And we'll get, as we get into that portion of the song, I'll make my point a little clearer, but here with these lines, he's just explaining he's lonely, and he's trying to maybe become more sympathetic to the cab driver by explaining his position here. What do you feel about that?
Right. If he is looking to get laid, in a sense, he needs to be more, I guess, vulnerable to this cab driver, because to the cab driver, this is a stranger that just got in my cab, but if he's trying to seduce her, so to speak, he's going to want to be more personable and let her know, who he is, his sensitive side. I need somebody to hold me type of scenario. So she'll, soften and be like, oh, okay. I understand what you're saying. And, maybe if she's attracted to him, she'll look at him and think, well, this might be an opportunity. So I think that's why he's saying more about himself and admitting the fact that he's lonely so that he can be more vulnerable to her.
Yeah, for sure. Vulnerability and sympathy is what he's kind of expressing with these lines. He's trying to elicit sympathy by being vulnerable, as he mentioned. So that's his ploy. Whether or not he's intentionally doing that to try to get laid, or if this is just how he feels, and he's just opening up because he's alone with this woman in this cab, and he just feels like he can do that. But the line that here at the very end of this section of the second verse, Drive it, baby, drive it. Drive this demon out of me. So this demon, what do you take that to be, Karen?
I would think the demon is the depression, the loneliness, the sadness, the indecisiveness, the troubled winds that he keeps talking about, the trouble he's in. You know, he wants her to drive those bad feelings out of him. Mm-hmm. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And I jotted those notes down as well. But then I also thought of something else. You know, so if you're thinking of sex in a very religious context, sometimes sex can be looked at as demonic or sinful, depending on the type of religion and what the beliefs are. So maybe the demon is, I was thinking maybe it was more of like his demonic sexual side, you know, like drive this demon out of me, drive these desires, these unholy desires out of me.
That's very good. That's very good.
I just thought of that last night.
Yeah.
Because the song goes and takes a very sharp turn shortly after the second verse, and it gets very sexual. And so I was just thinking, where's the tie-in? You know, how does it go from here, from what he's talking about being lonely and scared and frightened of, you know, the cold winds blowing, and he's just in a bad way. How does it go from there to like this raucous sexual encounter that he has with her later in the song? And this is the line, just because of, you know, the context around sin and the devil and sex are all sometimes Prince always preached sexuality and spirituality and religion and intertwined. So he didn't believe that himself, and he didn't sing about that. But we both know that there are belief systems where sex is looked at as a very, I wouldn't say sinful activity. It depends on how it's being used. Like if it's casual sex outside of marriage, or, you know, that could be looked at as sinful to some. And in this song, I mean, he just met this woman, so they're obviously not in a relationship. They're not married. So any kind of encounter he has, if it's being looked at by those people, would be looked at as sinful. And so the demon in him could be his desires, his sexual desires. I don't know. That's just one take on it.
That's a good one. And I like the fact that we're looking at it from different angles, which I think is what Prince wanted his listeners to do. Just that. Yeah,
exactly. So after the demon line, he implores her to take me to your mansion. Honey, let's go everywhere. Help me, girl, I'm drowning. Mass confusion in my head. Will you accept my tears to pay the fare? That's a good one. So going
now
back
you don't
to the
have
whole,
any
money. Right, he doesn't have any money. Going back to the whole sympathy and vulnerability, you know, he's really playing that up hardcore with that last line. Will you accept my tears to pay the fare? He's really, really playing that up, playing the sympathy card to get this woman to basically drive him around for no money at all. Will you accept my tears? The line where he says, take me to your mansion. So this confuses me a bit if we're looking at it literally, because what cab driver makes enough money to live in a mansion, right?
Exactly. So, I said the same thing.
I think a lot of people that listen to the song and hear that line think the same thing if we're thinking of it like literally. First of all, how would he know where she lives, a mansion or not? So the more I think about it, the more I'm thinking he probably doesn't mean mansion in the sense that it's an enormous home. I think he just means like the place where you live, and he just says mansion because he's just trying to, you know, put something in there, and that doesn't, you know, not an apartment or a home. It's a mansion. Take me to this amazing place where you live, this mansion. So I don't know. I don't really have, besides the fact that this is potentially still a fantasy of his that he's trying to fulfill. A female cab driver, rare, and she's attractive, and she is actually listening to him and interested in him. When I would think a lot of cab drivers, this is what they do for a living. Their job isn't to be therapists in the front seat, but in this case, it's working. And then let's say this cab driver has a mansion. She lives in a mansion. So she just drives a cab as a hobby, She doesn't really need the money. She just does it because she enjoys the interactions with other human beings. I don't know. It just all seems very fantastical to me.
Well, I said the same thing, that, you can call wherever you're living a mansion.
Yep.
And I agree with you. I think he was just, being cute when he said mansion.
Yeah.
Not literally a mansion.
Yeah, exactly.
Clearly, if you're a cab driver, you don't have a mansion. Unless, if you want to just put it out there, you inherited this mansion that you live in.
Yeah, and she's just driving a cab.
You don't pay for it, you just live there, yeah.
This is although I would think, like, if, me personally, if I inherited a mansion and I had like this enormous inheritance but I just wanted to work just to do something, I don't think I would drive a cab. It seems like kind of a dangerous job.
Especially back then, yes.
Yeah, and being a woman cab driver on top of it. Come on. Okay, so anyway, after the mansion line, and honey, let's go everywhere. So he doesn't even, now he's just being confusing. Take me to your mansion, take me everywhere. And like you said, he's probably just being cute, not really meaning, because how can you go everywhere? So he's just trying to be a little bit cute here with these lines and a bit of conflicting answers, just to maybe confuse her or just make himself more, endear himself more to her.
Right.
Help me, girl, I'm drowning, mass confusion in my head, which goes back to all the comments that we've made so far about the first verse and the chorus, about him just really having a tough time and having difficulty getting through whatever this tough period that he's in. And will you accept my tears to pay the fare? So at this point, we realize that he doesn't have any money, and if he really doesn't have any money, he's going to have to pay his fare a different way. And I don't think tears is going to be the way he pays it.
No.
No, ma'am. So, any other comments on the second verse before I move on?
No, I think we touched on it. I think we touched on the different angles, the different way that you can look at what he's saying, or, how he's saying it, how she's interpreting it. So I think we're both on the same page.
Yeah. Yeah, at this point we don't know how the lady cab driver of the song is taking all of this in.
Right.
Because there's no back and forth. This is a one-sided conversation, a one-sided lyrics. He's just singing these lyrics to her, and we don't have any idea, like what is her take on this?
She's
a lot
probably
of times
looking at him in the rearview mirror, like, who is this idiot?
Yeah, and other songs, and other Prince songs, or even like on the Time albums, Prince had female voices in the background, and they would sometimes have back and forth. You would hear like banter between Prince and a woman, or I'm just thinking of songs like off of What Time Is It, the Time album, where there's members of Vanity Six that are talking smack to Morris, and he talks smack back, and so you get a feeling like he's singing these lyrics, and then you hear what the woman is thinking about it. In this song, we don't get that. We don't get that luxury. We just have, the one side until we get to about the 3-minute mark, a little past 3 minutes in the song. This is an 8+ minute song, so it's a long song. And only about 3 minutes in, we get the whole section where we now understand where this goes, where this is going. It all worked for Prince and in Lady Cab Driver as well. If this is what she wanted. If she's looking for also a sexual encounter, she got what she wanted as well. Because now for the next basically minute and a half, you get Prince working out all of his frustrations in a sexual encounter with the Lady Cab Driver. So apparently it worked. All of his pleading and his, tears and his sensitivity worked for him.
Right. In a big way.
In a big way, yes. This is basically the climax of their encounter, pun intended, because it all leads up to this portion of the song. So the music changes slightly at this point, and now we start to hear like these bed creaking noises, and now Prince he's dedicating each one of what we have to assume is one of his thrusts to something. Early on in the song, he's dedicating them to either like some sort of personal or social issues, and he sounds angry. He sounds kind of pissed off, like he's really venting his frustration that he's been building up over these first couple of verses, and he's really letting it all out in this sexual encounter. And you hear in the background the lady cab driver is clearly enjoying it. She's expressing pleasure, so it's not one-sided. And just as a note, the lady cab driver is credited as Jill Jones. I think that's been well established at this point. It was credited right there on the album. It said lady cab driver JJ, so we all know at this point that is Jill Jones. So
right.
So anyway, before I get into the lines, so I guess, Karen, what were your thoughts? Maybe if you can recall the first time you heard this song and you got to this part of the song, or if you don't recall, then, like your thoughts about it today as an adult.
Well, that's the thing. When I was, when you're younger, you're sometimes clueless about sexual things.
Yeah.
And when I heard it the first time, I thought maybe he was hitting her, or inflicting some kind of harm on this woman. Like you said, he sounded angry.
Yeah.
So I was like, what's that about? But then, as I got older, I realized what we believed that he was actually doing in that moment when he was saying all of those things. But, when I first heard it, I thought that he was hitting her or, doing something to her because, like you said, leading up to that point, he had been troubled. He had troubles going on, and it obviously is coming out as he's having this experience with her.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I first heard it, I thought that it wasn't a good thing.
Oh, okay.
But as I got older, I realized, well, no, she obviously sounds happy, so it couldn't be a bad situation. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's interesting. I heard this song first. I was a teenager at this point, so I had figured it out. I was aware of what was happening. By the time I finally heard it, I wasn't that young, probably as young as you were when you heard it for the first time. So for me, I never had any confusion what was going on. It was pretty clear to me as a late teen. So it was, it's one of those songs where even to this day, when I hear it, if I'm in a car with like my kids and this part comes on, I either turn the volume way down or I skip past it. It's just, I don't know. I mean, it's fun part of the song. It's a very important part of the song, but it doesn't mean I don't have to feel uncomfortable about listening to it in front of my kids. And so, like, if I was a kid, there was no way I would have wanted to listen to this song or this part of the song in front of my parents either. So it goes both ways. I'm just, an adult now, a parent, so I can't. So now I look at it from that perspective.
Right.
It's like watching a sex scene in a movie with your kids. It's kind of uncomfortable.
Very. I can definitely understand that. And even though he's saying a lot of important things, he's still doing what he's doing, regardless.
Yeah, and if it wasn't for the squeals, the pleasured squeals of the lady cab driver, Jill Jones, in this song, in the background, you could almost kind of forget what he's doing.
Right.
It just kind of feels like he's just saying words, and and sometimes he says them a little sexual, but he does that a lot of his songs. He will sing certain lyrics and certain lines in a very sexual way. But the fact that you've got her moaning and groaning throughout the back for a minute and a half, a solid minute and a half of her, of her moaning and groaning in the background, that's where it kind of leads it to being a super sexual song, at least that portion of it. And there's no question my kids, they probably wouldn't have any idea. Let's just be honest. But it's just my uncomfortableness with it that causes me to turn the volume down when this portion comes up.
Yeah, I don't blame you for doing that. It's a lot. It's a lot.
It's a lot. All right, so since it is a lot, I think maybe we should start going through it. Okay, so the first line that you hear him say, "This is for the cab you have to drive for no money at all." So the fact that he's telling her that she's doing it for very, very little money, when he says no money, Prince didn't pay her any money, so he's paying her through tears and sex. So
right,
he's not really helping her cause here. But he says, "This is for the cab you have to drive for no money at all." So he's basically speaking for, all cab drivers who probably make low salary for this dangerous and tiring job. "This is for why I wasn't born like my brother, handsome and tall." And just if I look at this line, so Prince didn't have any brothers with both of his parents, John and Maddie, so all of his brothers were half-brothers, either his mom's sons from her previous marriage or his dad's sons from his previous marriage. So I don't know, I didn't look into how handsome or tall any of his half-brothers were. I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't either. I don't know if that was just a lyric or if it was really something he was talking about.
Yeah, could be just a lyric. But sometimes those types of things are steeped with a little bit of reality or a bit of jealousy, I guess. Like, say, for example, he did have some half-brothers that were what he would call handsome and tall. And, we all know Prince was a short man. Maybe he, as a youngster growing up, he might have looked up to them if they were older and maybe got a little jealous of the physical traits that he didn't inherit. Who knows? But he says that line, "This is for why I wasn't born like my brother, handsome and tall." So if you're listening to this podcast and you know for a fact that Prince's older brother, half brothers were handsome and tall, let me know.
Let us know.
"This is for politicians who are bored and believe in war." That's for me. That's who that one's for. "This is for discrimination, egotists who think supreme. And this is for whoever taught you how to kiss in designer jeans. That one's for where you have to live. This one's for the rich. Not all of them, just the greedy. The ones that don't know how to give." So I'm going to pause there. That's basically like the first half of the lines that he sings during this portion of the song. And as I mentioned, like all of these lines at this point speak to some sort of, like I said, social issue or personal issue, like, the line about his brother handsome and tall, but a lot of them are talking about the world around him, people being paid poorly for their jobs, politicians who are starting wars or think war is the answer to or the solution to economic crisis or some sort of conflict across continents. Discrimination, so he's talking about racism, discrimination, egotists who think supreme. So for me, that's people who are really just full of themselves and think that their ideas and their thoughts are more valuable than others. So these first section of the lines that he's singing or speaking when he sounds angry, do you get kind of the same feeling? Like he's singing these lines and are angry because they kind of suck, and these are some of the things that he's pissed off about?
Right. It just sounds like, in that moment, all of his frustrations just started to come out about everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes you wonder, where was this place he was in that all of this would come out? Because like you said, he talks about personal things regarding his brother and possible being jealous of his brother, and then he goes into political statements.
Hmm.
So he's just kind of like all over the place. It's like, this is my opportunity to get this out the way I've been feeling. This was, the drive I needed. In other words, the way for me to, get this out
Yeah.
or get these demons out, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, yeah. These
The
could be all the
whole,
demons too.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, these lines are interesting because it kind of really gives us, the listener, a look into Prince's head at the time. Like you have to imagine if he's writing the lyrics to the song, these are some of the things, whether some are made up for, for some levity or not. But a lot of these you have to think and assume that there were true concerns or problems Prince had or things that were weighing heavily on his mind. So I think this just gives us a good glimpse into Prince's brain at the time in 1982. Like, what were the things that he felt were our social ills, the things that really kind of bothered him about the world that he lived in at the time. Now, lines like, "This is for whoever taught you how to kiss in designer jeans." I mean, that is one of those lines that I mentioned that's probably just in there a little bit for comedic effect. As you mentioned, he's all over the place. So he's talking about in one line, "This is for discrimination," and then the next one he's talking about, you know, women who don't kiss well wearing designer jeans.
Right.
So he's all over the place. And this one's for where you have to live. That one is funny because if you're going back to the line about her mansion, what this leads us again to believe that she doesn't really live in a mansion. She didn't take him back to a literal mansion. She took him back to probably her crummy little apartment, and so now he sees where she lives, and so he's dedicating one of his thrusts to the fact that she probably lives in a shithole.
True. And then I was thinking too that he said you, but I don't necessarily know or know if he was talking about where she lives. Like, you meaning where we have to live. You know what I mean?
Yeah, could be. Could be. Once again, that's another one of those lines that could mean multiple things. So it could
Right.
be he's telling the lady cab driver that he's pissed off for the place she has to live because she makes no money at all driving cab, or just where you have to live. Like, if there's the slums or the ghettos or the parts of the country, we're supposed to be a first world country, but we have poverty, we have homelessness. So there's a lot of really bad places to live in this world.
Right.
So he's angry about that. He's angry a little bit about the wealth distribution, the inequities about that. He talks about the greedy. So this one's for the rich, not all of them, just the greedy, the ones that don't know how to give. So that kind of speaks still against the disparity of wealth in our country.
And the reference to designer jeans, designer jeans were huge at that time.
Mm,
So, maybe that was just a dig at the current culture at the time.
yeah.
Because designer jeans were really popular at that time. So I think it was just a sign of the times, basically, no pun, that he mentioned that.
Yeah. They were the trend, but they were also expensive. And so
Exactly.
not everybody could afford these designer jeans, which were looked at as, like a status symbol. It's just the stupid pants that you're wearing. It will tell you whether or not somebody is well off or not.
That's true.
Okay, so then the next section of this portion of the song, now it starts to get a little, well, the next line's weird. It's just plain out there. This one's for Yosemite Sam and the tourists at Disneyland. So, I mean, I kind of get where he's coming from with this line, just because to me, it goes a little bit back to the Controversy album, the song Sexuality. And on Sexuality, he expresses his disdain for what he calls tourists. Tourists that they look at life through a camera lens. Remember in that song he says,
Yes.
"What, no flash again?" We live in
Right.
a world overrun by tourists, 89 flowers on their back. And so he calls them double drags that teach kids love is bad. So I think this is kind of going back to the same thing about his disdain for tourists, and he doesn't doesn't literally mean people who are just visiting Disneyland. I think he's calling these tourists, these people that see life through what he calls a camera lens. And so it's not focused on the external, it's what's in front of you and what is very picturesque. And we have a little bit of that in our life now with social media, where we present a certain lifestyle that we may want to be living. That doesn't mean we actually live that way. There was no social media in the early 80s, but they had people with cameras, and cameras, you were able to take a picture with that camera, and you could have right next to you a homeless person laying on the ground, starving to death, but you're taking a picture, and the little lens is going to only show you what's in that box, and in that box could be something very beautiful too, and the picture wouldn't pick up everything around you. It just picks up what you want it to pick up. And so that's one way that I interpret that line, and how I kind of interpret his disdain for tourists in this song as well, where he talks about Yosemite Sam and the tourist at Disneyland. So when you hear that line, do you get, I mean, what do you think yourself, Karen?
Well, I'm glad that you gave your take on it, because I'll be honest, I had no idea what he was talking about. I was like, what?
It's pretty out.
Yeah, but what you just said, I appreciate that, because that gives me a whole new way of looking at that line, because I had no idea what he was talking about. I really didn't.
The tourist line had come up again previously in sexuality, so I kind of think of it from the same standpoint. But now at this point in the song, when he says that's for the creator of man, so after he says the Yosemite Sam and tourist at Disneyland, he tells her that this one's for the creator of man. So he's talking about God, obviously. And then all of a sudden he starts to become a little more, I mean, his voice changes. He becomes more serene in his thrusting and in his dedications. He seems more at peace, less angry. And now his dedications become more romantic, a little more thoughtful, a bit more spacey too. Like some of these lines are new agey thoughts. So there's a very distinct line drawn in the sand after he dedicates a thrust for the creator of man. So it's almost like he's gotten all of his frustrations out, and now he's thanking God again, and now he's thinking of, God has entered into his thoughts, and now he's calmed down a bit. Now he's feeling very romantic, because, for Prince, God and spirituality and sexuality are very intertwined.
Right.
So did you pick up on that when you heard this, his tone change?
I did too. I thought that because he mentioned what we perceive as God in that moment, it gave him a sense of clarity, and it kind of brought him back to himself. And he started to relax and feel hopeful almost. Mm-hmm. Despite what I'm dealing with, there is hope in all of this.
Yeah, that's good. That's good observation, because it does feel hopeful. All these lines now from this point on, after getting all of his frustrations out early, now he's talking about this one's for the ocean, the sea, and the shore. So, talk about nature and the beauty of nature. This one's for you. That's who that one's for. So now he took one from himself early on, talking about, being greedy and selfish. He said very early on, this one's for me. That's who that one's for. But now that he's in this frame of mind, he's dedicating one to her, to the lady cab driver.
Right.
This is for the women, so beautifully and complex. So now he's just basically dedicating to all women, because he's a lover of women. He's a lover of beauty. And he finds a lot of beauty in the female form. Right. This one's for love without sex. So even though he's having sex in the moment, he's realizing that there can be expressions of love without it leading to sex. And he like you said, he's got like this moment of clarity where it's all becoming very obvious to him, the good in the world. He was so angry and frustrated and scared of the way he perceived the world leading up to this encounter. And then it's just like, wow, okay, yeah, I mean, nature, I love women, and love itself is a wonderful thing, even if it doesn't lead to sex. This is for the wind that blows, no matter how fast or slow. Going back to nature again, and just, the earth around us. Not knowing where I'm going. This galaxy's better than not having a place to go. And now I know. He ends the song with that very kind of poignant line, now I know. I know.
Right.
I like that. I like how he kind of closes that all out, where he says, because very early on in the song he says, I don't know where I'm going. And he still says, I don't know where I'm going. But it's better to not know where I'm going and still be on this planet.
Exactly.
Because the world around me still has all this beauty that's worth living for. And now he knows. That's really kind of cool. I like the ending. I like the ending a lot.
I did too, because it brought the song full circle.
Mm-hmm.
I thought. So there was an ending to it, even though it was kind of all over the place at one point. You saw him get to that point. Okay, I get it now. I know.
Yeah.
I may not know everything, but I know where I'm going at this point.
Yep, he didn't know where he was going, but now he does.
Right.
Because the world has a lot of beauty in it, and there's still a lot of life to live. I mean, Prince is a young man when he's singing this song, so he had to realize that he had a lot to live for, and so do all of us as listeners of this song in 2019. And so, you can take a look at it from it being a very sexually charged song in this portion of it, and there's certainly a case one can make for sexual therapy, to get some of your frustrations out, and he makes that point very clear here. But there's also the second half of this portion of the song really lets us know that while sex is great, there's still love, and there's still all this other stuff that is important too, and we can experience all of it. It's not all or nothing. We can have it all, and we don't have to compromise, I guess.
Well, those endorphins kicked in.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's
Exactly.
why he was like calm and peaceful for that moment.
We have to hope that it's not fleeting, but maybe next time he feels this way, he'll have to hail that cab again and
Something.
and get his lady cab driver to help him out, because it really worked for him. It really calmed him down.
Absolutely.
She did a wonderful job of calming him down.
Yes, she did. Yes, she did.
All right, so that is Lady Cab Driver. I mean, this song there's still a good almost 4 minutes of music after this portion of the song, and he repeats, Lady Cab Driver a few more times. There's some more drum beats. There's guitar. He has a guitar solo in it towards the end of the song, which is great. But because this is a lyrics podcast, there's really not much more lyrics after this. The rest of the song is music. And so I guess this would be the time to close it all out. I think we kind of covered Lady Cab Driver as best as we could. There was a lot going on in this song. Despite not having a lot of lyrics, there's a lot to talk about, because it's one of those songs, I think, that can be interpreted multiple ways, which most good Prince songs can. And people get really kind of honed in and focus on the sex part of it. But leading up to that, I mean, what gets us, the listener, to this point, and what does it all mean? Because there's definitely meaning in this sex part. It's not just for shock value. I really don't believe that.
I don't either.
Do you have any final thoughts on Lady Cab Driver, Karen?
Well, I'm glad I had the opportunity to talk to you about this song and to get your take on it. I'm looking at this song kind of in a different way now, and I appreciate that. And what's interesting, like you said, the sex in this song was there for a reason. And like you said, I think it was a way for him to get through whatever depression or issue he was having, to get to the point of clarity. I think that was his breakthrough in a sense, you know, and he used the sex to get to that point. So I think that was really interesting that he used it in that way in this song.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think we all probably need to find our ways to kind of, whether or not we meditate or, you know, yoga, whatever, go for a nice long walk. Every person in their life has times where they're just not feeling, you know, they're having a bad mental health day, I guess you'd call it. Just not having a good day mentally, and to find that thing that gets us in that place of clarity and peace again, bring us and center us again. We all need to figure out what that is, because not all of us can go hail a cab and expect to find what we're looking for in the front seat of a cab. So, that's the takeaway for me is figure out what that is to help ease our minds. This has been the Press Rewind Prince Lyrics podcast. I've been your host, Jason Brenninger. I wanted to thank Karen Shedrick for joining me again. Thanks, Karen.
You're welcome. Thank you again for giving me this opportunity. I really do appreciate it.
Anytime, Karen, anytime. Get a hold of me at Press Rewind 75 on Twitter, Instagram. I have a Facebook page. All right, well, thanks, and until next time, goodbye.